Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the post race debrief. I'm joined by Niharika Ghorpade. I say hi, Niharika.
Hi.
And I think one of the first questions I want to, maybe address right now is people have asked me why we've named the show the post race debrief. And I think the best answer is we took a bit of inspiration from the US and the UK TV shows, which start with the Late Late Show, the Late Night Show, and a host of other things. And the reason we called it the post race debrief is because we know that you would have taken your post race debrief from your plethora of internet websites, which basically break down every race. But the post race debrief is supposed to be the one that you take after the post race debrief, where we kind of contextualize everything for you that's happened off the track, on track, and so that you have all the information so that you can make better opinions about what's happening in Formula
Yeah,
One.
and we debunk a lot of the popular narratives.
That's
We
the
break
most
them down
important.
in a very different way.
That's the fun bit, I think.
And we have a very unpopular opinion. And I only have time to talk about F1 post race. So yeah, that makes sense.
It literally and figuratively makes sense to have a post race debrief. But anyway, we're just coming off of an incredibly fun yet weird weekend at the Miami Grand Prix. Niharika, what's the weirdest thing you've seen at the Miami Grand Prix weekend?
The weirdest thing I've seen at the Miami Grand Prix was its guest list. It's literally become the influencer Grand Prix of the year. Some of the access, even I couldn't even I couldn't wrap my hand around how some people got access there. Like I pointed out, a dog influencer being invited there, a really hairy dog with 1.2 million followers, and in Miami heat, out in the grandstands. That must have been fun. That's very human to do by the dog owner and by the circuit organizers.
I think the weirdest moment for me, and this might be a bit of a real kicker, is I was surprised to see Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean that I expected somewhat, but really, I mean, Formula One really needs to stay away from controversy, and this is a way of banking on it. Like, did you see James Charles, the beauty influencer, the makeup guru?
Something Jeffrey. James?
No, not Jeffree Star. It was James Charles, right?
Is it?
Or James, the one who had the controversy with Tati Beauty.
Yeah.
Somebody like you inviting either the cancelled or about to get cancelled lot straight into a Grand Prix. Some of the women invited were, I mean, we just removed grid girls long ago, and you're inviting people who are literally a symbolism, a weird symbolism for women. Let's put it that way. Some of the guests on the list were just unjustified.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think there was at some point, I saw this on Twitter floating around. There was a circuit map with all the possible sex offenders within the Miami.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
So it really goes to say that Miami had different goals, marketing goals. Let's put it that way.
I don't understand that whole access system of theirs to content creators and influencers. Journalists are pretty much harassed to get their whole justification in order to get even media access into the sport. And yes, the content industry is growing, but when it comes to getting a content creator, podcaster, or influencer, any kind of access, it's a really thin line you're walking. And because that industry exists for people to be able to frame their narrative better in the public domain, or because of their reach, it's fair enough that stuff goes there. Like, it gives access to some. But both teams and the track need to really get their act in order when it comes to giving access and really vetting their background, especially when it comes to sexual offenses and things like that. We've also seen a bit of this at Vegas. But in Las Vegas, there were so many celebrities and so many people invited that it just kind of slipped under the radar. But this one was like an open show of it. Yeah.
Very true. And I want to ask you this. You've been in the pit lane before, and this is not the first time that we've had fans, creators, call them anything that you want, people that have paddock access sort of swarm the pit lane, and it becomes so difficult that drivers have sometimes complained saying it's so crowded in the paddock. Have you experienced that?
Yes, I have. Like, a pit lane. So we have our pit lane access, I think, on pre FP1 when we go and see the upgrades being put up on the car and their car presentations, and there'll be a list given to us that so and so have brought an upgrade, so and so cars will have their presentation, and so on and so forth. So the media has its own access, but in general, there are too many people in the paddock. The drivers at one time could walk around freely in that paddock, but their privacy is pretty much gone. You can't see a driver not getting mobbed, particularly at these paddocks where you have unprecedented access to fans in the paddock side. And then that is a crowded pit lane where the tracks have narrow pit lanes or narrower starting grids, and the grid can be a whole big mess. And that happens in Miami a lot, and that happens at these circuits, a lot of the street circuits too, because and a lot of them are like in wrong footwear, things like that. It's a mandatory thing that you have to wear closed footwear if you're in the paddock. Like, that's one of the things mentioned in our past guidelines. I don't know how celebrities are allowed to flout that norm.
But yeah, it's a wild world, because from our side it's quite literally the wild wild west. But I know it's not really the west in the US.
Yeah.
But I just want to bring things back onto the track, because we've had a crazy Grand Prix in terms
Yeah.
of not in terms of racing, but in terms of results. And I want to know. I want to point out two things that happened from our last podcast that came true.
Yeah.
One is, you clearly mentioned that, hey, Red Bull's not going to have it, all nice and dandy for them. They're going to have their butt whooped at some point.
Yeah.
At some point happened to be literally
And I
days.
also made sure McLaren's going to be good in Miami. I
Yes.
mentioned that clearly. Yeah.
Yep. So McLaren ended up catching up to them quite quickly. And second, you mentioned is, don't rule out Ricardo. Mr. Ricardo
Yeah.
is there, and he's in the game, and he was on game this
Yeah.
weekend. So I want to know your quick thoughts about everything that transpired in Miami. On
So
track.
let's go first to the Lando bits. We're basically talking of, last time I said that Andrea and Lando, for the first time, have made a bold statement in China, in Shanghai, that yes, they can beat a Red Bull. So now I'm going to say it without something that is there to back it up. They're the last ones to make such ridiculous statements. And they were pretty clear. Their upgrades came in Miami. But then there was this odd tire behavior. Like, if you look at the tarmac, it was 40 degs plus was the track temperature. And if it's under 40 degrees, somehow teams manage helping. Teams are not that, worried about car performance when the temperatures are, say, below 40. Upgrades worked about, say, they started working. I mean, the real fullest potential of them we saw more after sprint qualifying. And he suffered from something very similar, even Daniel suffered from, which is odd tire behavior on the softs. His lap on the softs in SQ1 or 2 was horrible. Like, Lando got knocked out. So Daniel had a similar day in qualifying, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, in McLaren, I think the point I had made was, if you looked at the car they were the only team to have the most heavily upgraded car, and Oscar had 50% of the upgrades, and he was still not bad. There is a theory there that, what if it wasn't the safety car,
Yeah.
Max knocking the cone and the bollard that would have got Lando his win. But no, even before Max hit that, if you saw Piastri and Lando's lap time, Lando at P6 was given a strategy that could help him chase a win. They already had that pace, but he had too many cars to pass. That made it easier and actually helped him pull a gap on Max, which was 7 seconds plus. But we don't know what the damage was on Max's car, whether it was so significant that he was having a loss in lap time or what it was. But from where I know, Max was worried about his track temp. He was worried about his tires right from from Friday itself. So yeah, McLaren's got a take for the upgrade.
Yep. But I do have to add one thing here. I was watching the lap times during the race, actually, and fun thing is, I did not watch the race live, so I was in full conscious in the morning when I was watching the race. So I was super invested in it because the 3 o'clock notification on my phone was that Lando Norris had won the race. I was like,
Yeah, basically, you were like, you didn't have the luxury, or sorry, you didn't have the privilege to watch it at an ungodly hour and wake up with red eyes the next day, which we have to
yes,
do.
which
Proud
you
to
do.
join. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was watching the lap times, and let me tell you, even with the so-called damage that Red Bull claims that Max had, he was still just as quick as he was before. So it doesn't
Yes.
look like it had a massive effect on his lap time.
No, I didn't. He was also wanted to go for the fastest lap, and somehow Piastri took it off him. Piastri was running last, and his lap times were similar to Lando. Now, given the current cars, they tend to struggle in dirty air a lot. Like if you go last year Brazil, go back to last year Brazil, Daniel and Piastri were running a lap down and they were quicker than their teammates in lap time. But you get stuck in dirty air at the back, then it's difficult to make it up to the grid. And yeah, with Oscar, I think you heard that radio where he was told, Oscar, we don't, when he started hunting Daniel down, he was told, like, we don't want a safety car. It's Lando's going to lose then. So yeah, he kind of backed off. But if you look at his time, he got the fastest lap. So yes, the upgrades have definitely worked. They have brought in something that helps them optimize the tires better. That's what I think it is.
And is it true that they only brought in 50% of the upgrades? So
they got in 50% for Piastri. For Lando, he had the 100%. But he just took time to optimize it. And I mean, on a sprint weekend, you just have one free practice. So that doesn't, you really don't know where everyone else is. Like Mercedes got a lot of upgrades, didn't work for them. They were fighting a Haas.
Yeah.
Hulk and Magnussen for Hamilton. So yeah, he got past them eventually, but they were fighting like in the lower midfield. So that's not exactly where they want to be. And McLaren were clearly on Red Bull's tail. And that's where I come to the point. Like, we are yet to see Red Bull brings upgrades to Imola. Ferrari is bringing them in Imola, where you have a lot more practice sessions. That'll be the real evaluation of where McLaren, how much progress McLaren have really made, and how much they can optimize it further and know where to extract the fullest of that upgrades potential.
So I know that back in the day, and I'm saying like a good 10 years before, we had the first checkpoint of the season that used to be Barcelona when you start the European leg.
Yes.
So that's when you start seeing real and true performances come out, because until then it's just a testing point.
Yes. When you go to the conventional tracks, like this year, the first conventional track we went to was Suzuka. So Suzuka was a bit of a teller because it's a proper track. It's not a street circuit. So that was a good teller of where certain teams stand. And but then you're bringing in upgrades. And some teams did bring upgrades to Suzuka. And then you bring these upgrades further on, maybe around Europe. So then when the European legs kick off, that's when you really start to see an evolution in the grid, or the grid bunching up or going further away. So I think where I can put a point here is Adrian Newey gave an interview pre-China to, I think, Motorsport, and he said Red Bull is struggling to find gains with that RB20. It's probably reached its peak, and at some point it's going to plateau. And I asked this to Max, and he was like, no, there's always some performance to extract. We're not going to bring in all our upgrades. But I really think that car will reach the fullest of its potential. And that's where you're going to see Ferrari and McLaren catch up. So are you going to see, I think we're going to see more different race winners.
So do you think that from, say, Imola, you expect the grid to slightly start shaking up in terms of the order?
Yes. I do expect that somewhere. Or the gap to Red Bull reduce. And maybe McLaren taking a step forward, even Ferrari for that matter, depending on Ferrari's upgrades. See, everybody brings upgrades, but those upgrades have to work. That's the caveat there. So yeah. And yeah, you were talking about Daniel Ricciardo.
I was talking about Daniel Ricciardo, and I know the second thing that you said, and very clearly, is that don't rule him out, which we didn't, and he showed his true potential in the sprint of P4.
Yeah. And that too, we kept a Ferrari at bay.
Very well kept, actually.
Yeah, and if the only way to overtake on defend on that track is late braking, then you don't want a Ricciardo in front of you, and that's exactly what Carlos had in front of him.
Exactly.
That's how it worked. But in general, like I told you last time too, the trend was building from China. And even after the Chinese race, you didn't have Helmut trashing his performance. Helmut actually said, took a swipe at Stroll. So you didn't have Helmut saying, no, that's a bad day. He just said it wasn't Daniel's day, period. But then obviously there's pressure in Miami to perform, but then he had this replaced grid penalty. So I won't say I'd write off the race, but then if you look at it, the RB car by now, whether it's Yuki in it or Daniel, once they're stuck anywhere below P15, it's almost like you might as well not be in that race, unless you can go to P11 when there are 20 laps left to go, and then 5. What happened with his car is probably what some other drivers faced in qualifying. He had an odd set of tire. If you look at his statements after the race, he blamed it on the dull set where he couldn't just optimize it, and he was sliding all over the place due to the soft tire and the temperatures, soaring track temperatures. And then when you have that one shot, you can't really make it because the gap to Yuki in the first attempt was quite good. It was almost equal. And then the second tire just seems to have fallen off. So yeah, then that becomes a scenario where your quali decides your race. And then he was just stuck in a DRS train where you can't do much. If a McLaren stuck behind him, then well and good. He's done that too. But he seems to be defending against a McLaren. He pushed Alex Albon into making a mistake, which brought out where Albon went off. So yeah, he didn't have much of an entertaining race. I'd say he didn't have too many passes to make, but then I think that is the story of the midfielders. If you look at Magnussen, them, I think what Daniel needs to do is now this trajectory you're seeing, where the car, I think he was given an underfloor that is designed to suit his driving style, where the floor of the car will generate more downforce at the front, which is what he exactly needs. So that's where he's going to start looking better than Yuki. And I think Imola should be fine. By Imola, it's not fine, and it's not turned around completely by Monaco. Then I'd say yes, it's trouble. That'll really be troublesome for them. So yeah.
I know you said earlier on that Marco seems to be a big, supporter of Daniel in this case, in the situation that he finds himself in. But I want to know if these kind of inconsistent performances, which is that one race you're brilliant, the second race you're nowhere, is it going to affect his chances of getting that second Red Bull seat or even any other potential seat?
Actually, in Miami, we already knew that he's on the back foot with the kind of grid penalties he had. So the sprint was actually a bonus. So at least he came with, overall, if you look at it, he came with 5 points off. His season started. That's the kind of thing. Consistency, yes, that is going to have to kick in now. Now he's under pressure to get that consistency in. There's going to be no room, Imola onwards, to make any errors. But yes, now onwards, you're going to see that because so far they could say, oh, it's only a quarter of the calendar done kind of thing. But from now to Belgium, he will be under pressure to deliver. I'm not surprised if he doesn't turn it around even more quickly. Like, I wouldn't be surprised Imola onwards if he starts, getting more comfortable. Because you have one free practice session. And then if you see the last 2 weekends, you might as well not write them off. They're DNFs for racing. But I think teams like, if you look at it, Red Bull got him to build him up. They got him back to build him up, not to break him any further than McLaren had. So they kind of owed that to him to give him a leeway there. Liam's not in a hurry when it comes to hunting a drive. He's already has that position in Red Bull that either don't perform, he replaces. But a mid-season swap, I don't see that happening unless Daniel really goes into a downward, which I don't see happening as such. That I don't think that seems to be the trajectory if you look at it on paper. Yeah, and hurting chances. He kept a Carlos at bay, who's also a contender of that drive. And if you look at it, he's in an RB, but his shootout is against a Checo who has a Red Bull and is more stable car, and Carlos who has a Ferrari who's also got a decently stable car, capable of podiums and wins. So whatever Daniel has to do here, I think it'll just have to mean keeping Yuki at bay is going to be more than enough for him to be taken seriously. And obviously you'll have these Mexicos and Miamis coming in, but Miami was definitely better than Mexico. Mexico, he finished P7. Miami finished P4, so they'll come to if Horner and Marco are supporters of his, then you'll see them count that P4 over the P18 or whatever. P15 is gone.
But anyway, now let's put things back into the larger picture.
Yeah.
Last year, 2023 F1 season, we had two total winners.
Yes.
Sorry, three total winners. A lot of it was Max Verstappen. The other two was one his teammate and Carlos Sainz. Now we're 5 to 6 races into Formula One.
Yes.
It's the sixth one, and we've had two winners. So from a balance and scale perspective,
Yeah.
are we doing better as a sport altogether? Is the entertainment value of Formula One still as high as it probably was before, or better?
Okay, so people have had a lot of early reactions to this season. And if you look at the first four racetracks, they're very different, one different from the other. And somewhere, if you look at Australia, Red Bull does have an Achilles heel, somewhere, where they tend to abrasive track surface and things like that. Other teams might have a chance. But then it's also Formula One is a developmental race, like we mentioned before with Lando. It's an engineering competition in the end, as much as it's a driving or racing competition on track. So once those cars start to develop better, they are going to catch up to Red Bull. I mean, look at last season. Like the point you made. Yes, we've had like 6 races now, and we've had 2 wins, 2 race winners who are not Red Bull. Last year, an entire season, we had that. That's why I said earlier too, I do see a lot of different race winners, or at least different podiums, more drivers making it to the podium. I mean, look at the Haas. Every point, yes, Magnussen has to get up to his tactics, but the Haas is doing wonders by my standards. I wouldn't have expected them after Gunther leaving. I wouldn't have expected them anywhere beyond the 8th place on the grid. But there are 3 teams that have still yet not scored points on 0. Williams, Sauber, and one more team. Yeah, 2 teams who are on 0. So yeah, that doesn't give a good look to the sport. But it is what it is. It's getting better. That's how I'd put it. And the entertainment value will increase when those cars start to converge and teams bring in their upgrades. Not everybody, in the cost cap era, not everybody can bring in upgrades. Like, you can't upgrade it every race. So one has to take that into perspective. You also have to see that in the first 6 races, how many are flyaways and how many are closer to Europe. How many are street tracks make no sense for upgrades compared to the conventional ones. So that's why I feel Europe onwards is when we really start to see the real pecking order come alive.
So, my theory on this.
Yeah.
We touched upon this slightly before, in the sense that most of them have expiring contracts this year. And it's that sort of a, you know, in school when you're slightly behind and you know you're lagging behind and you need to perform, you put in way more effort.
Yeah.
And then you overcook it, you sometimes underperform it. That's okay. But in the grand scheme of things, you just make the entire show look better. And I think that's the sort of season that we're heading towards, where, you know, everybody's...
A lot of them are going to have a point to prove.
Exactly.
Half the grid is out of contract. A lot of them are going to have a point to prove. A lot of those teams are going to want to market themselves to be in a better place for 2026. And that's where we are going to see... I mean, obviously, you can't have a team like Williams and Sauber, which is becoming Audi soon, sitting at the back of the grid with 0 points, 6 races in. That doesn't put a good look on it. Simple. A lot of them are going to want to increase their market value, or they're going to lose their drives to really, maybe underexperienced rookies. And I see that happening at the bottom of the grid more than front.
And these are legacy teams as well. I don't think they can afford to be there for too long either.
Yes.
They need to be...
The whole reason for more investment in Williams was to help it structure itself back. We thought Haas were in an odd place because they've done 0. They haven't multiplied their investment apart from MoneyGram coming aboard. Haas doesn't have any decent, fancy sponsors. So they haven't revamped their facility at Banbury. It's more or less a bit of a tweak since that team was Manor Marussia or Manor Racing. And you've seen Williams go all out there. Get the infrastructure sorted. Audi obviously taking over Sauber, and they'll have 2 bases when they become Audi. But you can't have these teams ending at the bottom. So I do expect that second half of the second half of the pecking order team wise, I do expect it to go fairly up and down, and it's going to be really interesting. I feel we're going to be talking a very different story by Abu Dhabi.
I'm looking forward to that. But
Yeah.
you did mention a couple of teams who are at the back of the grid. But I also want to slightly dip into this subject about a potential other team joining Andretti. During the Miami Grand Prix weekend, we saw that right before the weekend, actually, they had garnered the support of about 12 congressmen in the US,
Yes.
and they wrote a collective letter to Liberty Media.
Yeah.
Asking specifically what were the grounds of rejection. And I'm sure you would have read the letter, and it actually came
Yes. So the
quite.
grounds of rejection that the teams gave was that they don't bring any value as a customer team with the Renault engine. They had a tie-up with Renault, so they don't bring much value to the grid, being a customer team. If they were a manufacturer, they come in stronger, and that makes the application stronger. Which means Cadillac GM would have to be a manufacturer, but they also had that provision in their application that they would turn into a manufacturer by, say, 2028. So, given the kind of money they came in, I felt the F1 Commission and teams got a bit too greedy. They didn't want to share that revenue. Formula One is doing extremely well, and that cut, even for a team like Haas, is a huge cut of the revenue. They're shareholders in the whole revenue sharing. So yeah, I think there they really sabotaged Andretti a bit too much. And moreover, say you'll have a Ferrari, a Mercedes not wanting a Ferrari to have a fourth engine supplier. It's more a fight between Mercedes and Ferrari. And it's because these engine manufacturers have more teams. Like there's often this debate made over, oh, Red Bull have a second team, they shouldn't be allowed on. No. Red Bull, Formula One appealed to Red Bull to go and save Minardi. That's when Dietrich had a lot of money to afford another team and actually bailed Minardi out and made it into a Toro Rosso, and now they want to become equal team. But then, and other teams also had a provision to come up with a second team. It wasn't like they couldn't back then. It's just they didn't seem it profitable. And they preferred being engine manufacturers, which meant more clout and political power. Where if you have 3 customer teams you're supplying to, you have 4 teams in technicality rallying to your cause. You politically control about, say, 8 cockpits where you can put your junior drivers, just everything. Ferrari had a similar investment in Sauber, calling it Alfa Romeo. They pulled out, and then it became Audi Sauber. So they had 2 teams there. But then again, it's like Toto not wanting Ferrari to have a 4th team, whereas Mercedes supplies 4 along with itself, 3, and themselves 4. Then he has the power right now. So I don't know who did what and what the discussions were. But it was really a lot of, I think Andretti could have made it to 2026. And from where I see this congressional hearing and the appeal from there, if they do make it by 2026, that's the best thing that can happen to Formula One, is getting 2 more spots in the grid. That way, we don't see good drivers leaving, and we see those rookies getting their place.
You know what? I read that letter a couple of times, and I noticed 2 things. One is the language that they had collectively put together was very passive aggressive.
Yes.
It was almost like you know that the decision is wrong, and you don't want to be light about it, you don't want to be diplomatic, so you have to use a bit of harsh language.
Yes, you just found flaws in it. You've gone out of your way to find flaws
Yes.
in a way to write off Andretti, more than giving a reasonable, yeah.
Right?
argument.
It came off as a threat to Liberty Media. Do you see it as a threat to Liberty Media?
I think that's a good way of bringing them in line. It's a good way of telling Formula One that you can't just carry on doing things and writing off people unfairly, and doing it when it works in Europe and not in America. And I am really a supporter of another American team on the grid, because Haas does not bring significant value. Haas is not an American winning team, and Andretti has motorsport in his DNA. Andretti is a very good motorsport name in almost every sport.
Every sport, exactly. Every
They aren't
category.
doing badly in Formula E. They aren't doing badly in Indy, IMSA, wherever. I mean, they deserve as much as a chance as, say, anybody else does. And I just, when that Andretti bid was rejected, I just felt it was a bit unfair. I feel it was a lot of the Europe and the the lobby in Formula One playing against in Red. And this might just this might give the, set things in motion and, make things more fair.
So right before we kind of wrap the entire thing up, we have maybe a week to go before we head to Imola. Are you going to Imola?
Yes, I'm doing Imola and Monaco.
Imola and Monaco. Okay,
I skipped Miami and I made use of it. But I've got Imola and Monaco now. So yeah, that'll be my next.
That's a win. That's honestly a win. You
What?
get to do it's a win. So you get to ditch the influencer Grand Prix and do.
Yeah, I get to ditch influencer Grand Prix. And honestly, Miami makes no sense for me at that time of the year. And this year I've tried and avoided the long hauls at the beginning of the year, like Japan, Australia, Miami. And then I'm doing about 15-ish this year. So I'm doing about 15 Grand Prix this year. So that kind of spreads it out. And maybe I do all the long hauls towards the end. But I'm in America at this time of the year. And look at the weather in Miami. It was hot.
No different from what Kolhapur is, I bet.
No, Kolhapur is like soaring 40s right now. We're in the heat wave along with you people.
Yes.
I mean, Bangalore's cooled down, so I envy your rain. I was just telling a friend like a day ago, I'm like, it's raining in Bangalore. We've been waiting for this in Kolhapur, but then, yeah, I guess I'm just hoping for it to rain, honestly.
I'll have to edit so much of this video because half of it was just like thunder behind me because it's...
Seriously?
Oh,
I was like looking at you. I couldn't see thunder.
Fully lightning and thunder behind.
Here, it's not even a leaf moving. It's not a single leaf moving. It's hot. It's like 36 by 4 p.m. That's not Kolhapur weather. But yeah, it's short-lived for us. We'll get our rains and we'll cool down.
Perfect. But will things cool off on track now, heading into Imola? Or do you think it's going to be soaring hot by the time we get to Imola and we see new and renewed performances from people that we didn't expect?
I think Imola onwards, yes, you're going to see a lot of surprises this year. You will see a lot of them perform really well. And yeah, it'll be nice to see. Monaco was a mixed bag.
Always.
Monaco, we know it's standard.
Right. But this is becoming a fun tradition now. I want to know what you are going to predict or what you expect to happen in the next 3 races because they're going to be back to back.
I think Imola, I would expect Ferrari and McLaren to come a little closer to the Red Bull. Okay. Unless the Red Bull upgrade is so good that they just, drive off into the sunset kind of thing. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think McLaren and Ferrari will crack it in Imola. Mine is maybe the unpopular opinion. Everybody still expect Red Bull to drive off into the, get away or run away with the lead. But I don't think so. I think McLaren and Ferrari are going to be on the top of their game. They've been waiting for it. And I think Imola will see things mix up or the grid bunch up a bit. As far as RB and Yuki Daniel and the rest, the midfield goes, I think Aston Martin will step in. That's if Aston are bringing good upgrades there, you'll see a bit of a step ahead. I don't know how far Mercedes are going to make a step ahead. Them and Alpine are my biggest confusion. They're my biggest disappointment so far is Mercedes and Alpine. Like Toto Wolff has said, even if we hire Adrian, we can't solve our problems. That's been his statement after Miami. So you can well imagine how bad it is. And so we're going to have, I don't know where those teams fall in, but do I see midfielders overtake them if they carry on doing what they are and their upgrades not working? Yes. It's a bit tough for them. I hope it's not like that. They're also teams with a huge history and a tradition. But yeah, maybe Aston Martin overtake Mercedes. I'm not sure. But if Aston brings their upgrades, I do see that happen.
I'm looking forward to the next week's episode to kind of break.
Yeah, that's my prediction. And any specific predictions team-wise? Which team were you looking for a prediction? What were you wanting to predict? Or get out of me?
Okay. I think I'm one of those people that are hell-bent on the fact that Red Bull will run away into the sunset.
Okay.
Because I think they were playing the political game here by saying that, you know what, we've already peaked here and there's no more upgrades. But they always say this before they have this trump card and they play it on you. And then they just...
And I'm going a bit by what Adrian said in his interview. I think it was an interview to Jonathan Noble, Motorsport. I think this car is going to plateau. I think I'm going by that one. I feel the others are going to pick up. The others also have equally talented people in the teams. Like McLaren have some talented people there. Ferrari has it. And yeah, I think some people are saying, was that Lando's true pace? Well, go see his lap times. The McLaren lap times were competitive to the Red
Good.
Bull.
They were very
They were
good.
really good even before Max hit that bollard or cone or whatever. So yeah, I would expect say McLaren and Ferrari to up the ante. I'm sticking by that on my prediction.
I'm also going to predict that either this race or the next will have one of the backmarkers score a point or two. Maybe in Monaco, if we have enough
I'll
DNS.
give that to Alpine. One of theirs has a point to prove. Because it's the sixth week and Gasly's got overtaken by Esteban, and you might just have one of them. Or maybe a K-Mac.
I would really
Kevin.
wish some good luck for this guy. Honestly, yeah.
We can't put RB as back markers. Yuki or Daniel, I wouldn't count them there. They are somewhere in the middle. So right now, who do we have? Williams, Sauber. Maybe a Valtteri at Monaco, because he's an experienced driver, and Monaco is one of, as much as it looks like the slowest race of the year, if you see Monaco's, how Monaco is as a city or a principality, it's got an elevation.
Yeah.
Try walking the track in Monaco. So when you're driving at slower speeds, but they're very physical. Like I remember one race where Lewis won it, and he said, I couldn't even celebrate because I was so done after the race. And it's 78 laps of it. So yeah, that is one of those races where I'd expect, and it's going to be cloudy and rainy in Monaco. So I don't know what the temperature is. The temperature in Imola and Monaco is between 14 and 25 for now. So we might have mixed weather. So put in the Rainmasters, the more experienced one around Monaco. Expect safety cars in Monaco because, like you said, half the grid is out of contract. Each one wants to prove a point. And if Magnussen unleashes himself, yeah, he's on a one race ban, literally close to one. Have you noticed? 10 penalty points. But I don't think Haas or him give a damn.
They shouldn't. I think
they're doing that, but that's the plight of Formula One. That's why another thing I might want to add in is they're actually planning to increase the point system, revise it to make it even consider more than a P12. There was one where, did you see the
point system?
The point system. They're planning to revise that because a lot of them feel that there are better on-track battles happening in the midfield and don't get their fair share of reward as compared to the front where it's pretty straightforward. So that will be very interesting if that comes into play in the future, of course. But yeah, that's the plight of Formula One, where even a Haas has to pull something like this, where Magnussen's driving like a maniac to help Hülkenberg get 1 point. So yeah, that's how it.
I think this would be a good thing to sort of dissect in the next episode. But for this one, I think we're at time. And on this bombshell, I think we should take it to next weekend and say goodbye to all of you. If you
next time, this will be from Imola. It's actually
you're going to record from Imola. This is going to be awesome. You should probably take us behind the scenes.
Yeah, maybe if I can.
You can, because they're like
maybe I can do it. Yeah. Let's see what we can come up with there.
Lovely. But for everybody that tuned into the second episode, thank you so much. Please continue engaging with us on our social media. If you have any questions, comments, please put them down. We'll pick it up. We'll address it in the next episode. And as always, have a great one, guys.